Almost 2 years ago, I stopped buying clothes. Any clothes. I always wanted to be a person who wore homemade clothing, but I realized it was never going to happen because it's just too easy to go out and buy what you need. To reach the level of professionalism I wanted in my sewing would require practice, and I was never going to get that practice unless I set a strict rule and stuck to it. However, there is one genre of clothing that is almost impossible to sew for yourself. Athletic wear. Okay, fine, you can make it, but modern athletic wear is constructed on highly complex machinery using specialized elasticized materials. Any attempt to replicate that is just not going to be the same. This has gotten me thinking about historical solutions. And for a while now, I've wanted to try adapting an 18th century stay pattern into something functional as a modern sports bra. For me, this project is the essence of for science. On the scale of clever to dumb, I do not know where this idea falls, but I'm never going to find out if I don't try it. Making the pattern was not as difficult as you think. I started out with the pattern that I already altered to my measurements for the 18th century stays pattern. The only reason I'm using this pattern is because I already know how it fits me, but you could use pretty much any 18th century stays pattern. On all of the pieces, I marked a line about an inch above the natural waist. To make a mock-up, I folded the bottom half of each pattern piece out of the way and traced them onto a thick cotton canvas. I like canvas for stay mock-ups because I don't think you need to bone them in order to get a good idea of the shape. Once I had cut them out, I pinned them together and sewed along the traced markings. And then, instead of boning these seams, I'm just going to open them and then use a zigzag stitch to flatten them. One mock-up trick is that I have a very long strip of decorative trim with eyelets in it, and I use it for all of my mock-ups. I just sew one end to each side of the back and use it to lace up, and then when I'm done with that mock-up, I just rip it off and save it for the next one. For this mock-up, I also cut a couple of very wide strips because I was planning on sewing the straps as one piece with the body of the stays, and I wanted to get an exact fit. Okay, so here are the finished pattern pieces overlaid on the original pattern pieces, and you can see the 3 back pieces are virtually identical. They just end at that waistline that I drew. But the front piece has changed quite a bit. Not that much though. I added another seam, so there's a whole nother side panel. But the main difference is just at this top edge, I raised the neckline by about an inch, and then I drew it up into the beginning of the strap. And that was really all it took. This was not that difficult of a pattern to make. Then of course here is the strap, and I have the exact angle at which it connects at the back. I thought I would do gussets to open up a little bit more bust room, but then when I was trying on the mock-up I realized that I didn't really need it, so I just decided to go with the flat 18th century shape. So yeah, they're still on my pattern even though I didn't end up using them. For the outer layer of fabric, I'll be using this charcoal gray linen. For the binding, I'll be using this natural linen, which you might notice this is the same combination I made for the athletic shorts earlier this summer. For the interlining, I'll be using this heavyweight linen canvas. And for the lining, I'll be using this lightweight white shift linen. The canvas came from Burnley and Trowbridge, this came from Joann's, and these two probably came from Joann's or Hancock's. In the machine, I'll be using this Coats & Clark cotton quilting thread. And then for any hand stitching, I'll be using this linen thread from Burnley and Trowbridge. For boning, I'll be using this standard plastic boning, not because it's actually good, but because once upon a time I accidentally bought a gross and now I'll never be rid of it. However, for the curved bust rail piece, I'll be using this spiral steel. And here they all are, all of the panels basted together. And I was originally planning on making the straps as one piece, but the reason I changed my mind was because I was afraid that since it was kind of cut on an angle, it would not be straight of grain and it would stretch out instead of being nice and solid. And it just now occurred to me that I could have left the outer strap as one piece and just seamed together the inner strap and cut that on the straight of grain, which could have done the job. But, you know, things to remember for next time. All right, let's see what seams it seems we can seam. That's called a polyptoton, by the way. Good morning once again. So last night I ironed open those seams, then I sewed them open to make the boning casing on one side, but in this morning light I have decided I don't like that. So I think that I'm going to seam rip this side and then I'm going to sew them folded over and then just sew on one side. I feel like that'll be structurally stronger. Okay, that is done, and I am much happier with these boning channels. I think they look a lot nicer. I still left the middle blank because I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do with the gussets yet. I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and do my eyelets so that I can try it on and make a decision on this. Okay, so this is where we're at right now, and I think that I am actually going to skip doing the gussets and just do all of the boning and stiffening. And the thing is, these are not very tight. I have them pretty loosely laced on right now. They're very comfortable, other than the itchy linen canvas that I haven't lined yet. And also the straps fit me pretty precisely, and I think that I'm going to go ahead and just sew them down. I do not think I'm going to add any kind of adjustable closure. I will sew them down kind of last so that they could still be unstitched and restitched pretty easily. I think that this for a pretty practical daily wear piece could work just fine. Okay, it's starting to come together pretty quickly now, and I'm going to start attaching the bias tape, which is left over from when I made the shorts, and inserting the boning, all of which will be plastic except for the bust rail here, which will be stainless steel. What is that called? The bendy kind. Oh. To now, and there are only a few things left. I need to fold these down and tack them in place. I need to make and sew in the lining, and I'm going to make a placket that stitches in right here. And I'm losing steam, so I will tell you about that in the future when I'm editing the video. I talked about this bust panel a little bit when I did my silhouette video, but in case you didn't see that, basically one of the things I was experimenting with on this set of stays is I wanted to try and make a pair that I could wear without a shift underneath, and the one function of a shift that I just could not do without was the bust control portion. So for this pair of stays, I wanted to build in a gathered section at the neckline that could fulfill that function. At first I made a few different attempts at a overly complicated and ultimately unsuccessful pattern, but then I found a scrap that was actually a leftover cutout neckline from a shift, and I was like, hey, that's perfect. To make this bust panel, I ironed over the top edge for a hem, but before I stitched in the hem, at the center front I added 2 small eyelets for a drawstring. Then I finished off that hem, and I threaded it with 1/8 of an inch wide cotton tape. Since I was basically making this pattern up, I didn't know how wide the panel needed to be, so I pinned the corners of it about where I wanted the top edge to sit, I gathered it up, and then I tried it on. While trying it on, I adjusted the gathers and kind of loosely pinned them in place. And then I made markings feeling for where the edge of the stays met the white. After that, I unpinned it and ungathered it so I could see the markings laid flat. I evened out the line and then trimmed the excess, down to about 1/2 inch past the blue. And then I ran a gathering stitch along the bottom, about 1/4 inch away from the edge. I drew in the gathers, evened them out, and pinned them in place. I don't know what this stitch is called, but then I took these zigzagging stitches over top of the gathers. And now that the bust panel was held in pretty securely, I could go tack down the straps. I did this using a small, strong back stitch. First I did a row at the very base of the bias tape. Then I did another row at the top. Down to just the lining, and for the body of it I'm going to use this same white linen, but for the straps, in order to minimize bulk, I'm going to use this cotton twill tape. Alright, that's ready to stitch down, and I didn't bother filming any of it because it's almost 11 and I want to finish it tonight.